Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into one of the absolute most powerful tools any writer can have in their back pocket. So, you know the five senses, right? Sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing? Well, today we are putting a laser focus entirely on that last one, the auditory sense. We're exploring exactly how writers use specific words to literally make you hear a story in your mind. It honestly feels a bit like magic, but actually, it's a highly structured technique. Think of it kind of like being a Foley artist for a movie, but instead of using props, you're building a blockbuster soundtrack using nothing but your vocabulary. To kick things off, let's try a quick interactive listening challenge. Seriously, right now, close your eyes, just look away from the screen for a sec. Okay, imagine you're sitting in a completely quiet room, and suddenly you hear a sharp tapping on a table, then the rough crumpling of paper, next the sharp jingling of keys, the smooth pouring of water, and finally, the slow, heavy creak of a door opening. All right, you can open your eyes now. What did you hear in your imagination? What specific words popped into your head to describe those sounds? And maybe more importantly, how did that sequence make you feel? Maybe a little curious, or even a bit anxious? That immediate emotional reaction, right there, is exactly what we're going to learn how to capture today. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll define sound imagery. Second, we'll identify auditory words. Third, we're going to distinguish this from automatopoeia. Fourth, we'll explain the link between sound and mood. And finally, we'll write a description together. Let's get started. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, defining sound imagery. What can the character or reader actually hear? So, what exactly are we talking about here? Sound imagery, which by the way is also called auditory imagery, is the use of descriptive words and expressions that appeal directly to the sense of hearing. Basically, it helps readers imagine sounds. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that you aren't just telling a reader what's happening. You are literally activating their ears through your text. You're giving them a soundtrack. To see this in action, let's look at this sentence. The waves crashed against the shore while coconut leaves rustled in the wind. Now, really notice the dynamics there. Crashed is this loud, powerful, super aggressive sound, but then it's immediately contrasted with rustled, which is soft, gentle, almost like a whisper. Just by picking those two specific verbs, the writer picks us up and drops us right on the edge of a breezy seashore. Moving on to section 2, identifying auditory words. Where do these sounds actually come from? Okay, so the entire world of auditory inspiration can basically be broken down into 5 clear categories. First up, you can pull sounds from people, like a soft whisper or a loud shout. You can use animals, think of a bark or a chirp. Nature gives us incredible words like crashed or howled. Then we have objects, which can clang and creak. And finally, machines, which hum and roar. When you categorize sounds like this, it kind of hits you that every single element in your scene, from a human being down to a literal toaster, has the potential to add something unique to your story's soundtrack. Now, once you know exactly where a sound is coming from, you essentially get to act like a DJ and adjust the volume knob. As the writer, you choose the intensity. For soft sounds, you might throw in words like murmured, trickled, or pattered. But if you need to crank it up, you switch to loud sounds like crashed, thundered, or clanged. And what if you want to build up a rhythm, or maybe some tension? You use repeated sounds like tapped, ticked, or buzzed. Your word choice is quite literally the volume control in your reader's head. All right, section 3, distinguishing from onomatopoeia. Because trust me, they aren't always the same thing. Let's just clear up a super common misconception right off the bat. Over on one hand, we have onomatopoeia. This is a single word that literally imitates an actual sound. Think comic book style, right? Boom, or splash, or buzz. But on the other hand, we have true sound imagery. This is a full contextual description. For instance, the thunder rumbled across the dark sky. Now, don't get me wrong, onomatopoeia can absolutely be a part of sound imagery, but sound imagery is the broader brushstroke. It paints the whole descriptive picture, rather than just throwing a quick sound effect onto the page. And really, onomatopoeia is just one single tool in your auditory toolbox. There are plenty of other sound devices you can layer into your imagery to really beef up the atmosphere. You can use alliteration, like the wild wind whistled, repeating that W sound. You can use repetition, like drip, drip, drip. Or you can play around with rhyme and rhythm. The cool thing about these devices is that they don't just describe a sound. They actually make the sentence itself sound musical and rhythmic when the reader is saying it in their head. Let's head into section 4, explaining sound and mood. This is all about shaping the atmosphere of a scene. Okay, it's time for a quick interactive reading workshop. Take a listen to this. At dawn, the rooster's sharp crow crossed the quiet shore. Coconut leaves rustled as waves slapped the sand. A distant boat engine hummed. Just kind of let that sit in your mind for a second. Can you spot the 4 specific sound words the author planted in there? Let's break them down together and see exactly how they build the mood. First, the crow of the rooster instantly signals the start of the day. Then, the leaves that rustled create this gentle, breezy vibe. Next, the waves that slapped the sand. That makes the shoreline feel active, right? It's alive. And finally, that boat engine that hummed adds this amazing sense of depth and a distant background noise. When you weave these 4 specific auditory cues together, you aren't just making noise, you're creating a vivid setting. You get this peaceful, yet quietly active morning that the reader can actually feel. So, the big takeaway here is that context is absolutely everything. Sound imagery creates mood. If you want to write a cheerful scene, well, you'd use things like birds chirping or children laughing. But what if you want a tense scene? You bring in thunder, roaring, and windows rattling. A mysterious vibe? How about a door creaking in an otherwise totally silent room? Or maybe a secretive mood? Just add voices whispering in a dark hallway. You are entirely in the driver's seat of the reader's emotions just by choosing which sounds they hear. Let's actually slow down for a second and think about this. Imagine you're writing a scene with rain. In one version, the rain drummed steadily. In the other, the rain pattered softly. How does tweaking just that one descriptive phrase completely shift the emotional weight of the room? Well, drummed steadily feels very active, very heavy. It might even feel cozy if your characters are inside by a warm fire. But pattered softly, that feels peaceful, delicate, maybe even a little eerie or mysterious depending on what happens next. Just one single word totally rewires the feeling of the environment. And that brings us to section 5, writing a description. It's time to level up and actually apply these skills. Check out the stark contrast here. On the one hand, we have a plain sentence. It was raining outside. I mean, sure, it's fine, but it's boring. It's totally flat. It gives us information, but absolutely zero experience. Now look at the other sentence. Rain pattered against the roof while water gurgled through the drain. Boom! Suddenly, you are right there. You can literally hear the light impact on the roof and that hollow, liquid sound rushing through the drain. That right there is the pure magic of this technique. You're transforming a plain, boring text into a vivid, lived experience. If you're ever stuck while editing a scene, try using this simple mental check to analyze your word choices. It goes like this. The word blank helps me imagine the sound of blank. It creates a blank mood. So for example, the word clanged helps me imagine the sound of heavy metal dropping. It creates a jarring, tense mood. Try plugging a word like whispered or rattled into this frame in your head right now. It practically forces you to connect your specific vocabulary choice directly to the emotional outcome you want. All right, I've got a creative challenge for you. I want you to build your very own soundscape. Pick just one of these settings: a busy schoolyard, a rainy afternoon, a community celebration, or a quiet morning at home. Your goal here is to write 3 to 4 lines that layer different sounds on top of each other to create a rich, completely immersive auditory environment. And to make this super approachable, you can totally choose your own path here. If you want to start small, try step 1 and just practice plugging some rich sound words into existing sentences. Feeling a bit more confident? Jump to step 2 and write original lines entirely from scratch, just making sure you can name the specific mood you created. And if you really want to flex those writing muscles, go for step 3. Try to combine sound imagery and onomatopoeia and a sound device like alliteration all into one killer descriptive paragraph. Once you've built out your soundscape, run it through this final checklist just to be sure it hits the mark. Did you use at least 3 distinct sound words? If someone else read it, could they immediately identify the setting just from the sounds alone? Did you create a clear, undeniable mood? And maybe most importantly, can you explain why you chose those specific words and the exact emotional effect they carry? If you're checking all those boxes, you aren't just making noise anymore. You are officially making art. Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. You know, sound imagery is about so much more than just describing noise. It's a way to reach out, grab your reader, and pull them headfirst into the world you've created. It makes them feel the atmosphere, the tension, and the vibrant life of the scene. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Next time you sit down to write, or even the next time you open a book to read, what sounds will you make your audience hear? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and hey, keep listening closely to the words around you.